अगर आप चाहते हैं कि हमारी वीडियो बर वक्त आप तक पहुंच जाए तो हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करके बेल आइकॉन के बटन को दबा दें और हमें लाइक और शेयर भी कर लें। थैंक यू।
अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह रब्बिल आलमीन वस्सलातु वस्सलामु अला मुहम्मदिल अमीन फ़अऊज़ु बिल्लाहि मिनश शैतानिर रजीम बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम। ख़ातिन व हज़रात, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपकी तशरीफ़ आवरी का। तो मैं गुजारिश करूँगा शाहिद साहब से कि वो सबसे पहले अपना माइक ऑन करके अपना तारुफ़ करवा दें और उसके बाद फिर अपनी किताब के हवाले से भी बताएं और फिर जो अब आखिर में फिर इंशाल्लाह उससे मुतल्लिक़ सवाल जवाब लेंगे।
Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm extremely thankful to all of the audience who gathered, who provided their precious time to make it possible, this virtual conference here. And all the praise and thanks to the Lord who created us, who blessed us with the reason and power of understanding. And He endowed us with the discretion to see the right from wrong and sent the best of His devoted servants to guide and instruct us. A lot of thanks we should provide to those pure servants of Almighty Allah who instilled humanity into the progeny of Adam alayhi salam and who provided us the rules and regulations of the civilized living, and who provided us those rules by following which we can achieve peace in this world and salvation in hereafter. After that, I'm extremely thankful to Al-Mawridi Canada, who provided me opportunity to present the summary of my book, which I have written last year. And I'm extremely thankful to the brother Faisal Aslam, who is the first person whom I met in Al-Mawridi, Canada. And he showed an extreme hostility for that, hospitality, extreme hospitality. And I'm extremely thankful to Shan Sheikh brother, who assisted me in every field that how to present this summary of the book. And before proceeding to the summary of the book, I would like to give small introduction of myself. My name is Shahid Amin Malik, and I was born in 2003, 5th of March, in Srinagar, Jammu and Kashmir, which is currently part of India. Last month in September, I moved to Canada for further studies. I have completed my 12th standard last year in 2020. After that, I moved to Canada. Initially, I started my schooling at near from my home, and the major schooling which is started that was from the 5th standard to 10th standard. It's a Jamis Rajul Uloom. It's Islamic Modern Institute in Valley of Jammu and Kashmir. It's one of the prominent institutes in there, which is Islamic, and which also the modern education is provided there. I started initial schooling from 5th to 10th, and along with those years, Alhamdulillah, I completed Hifz Quran and basic Islamic studies there. In post, after I completed 10th, then I went to Srinagar, the capital city of Jammu and Kashmir. There I studied physics, chemistry, biology, and mathematics for 2 years. Once I completed this last year, then I came for further studies in North America. Currently, I'm studying 2 courses. One is on campus in Canada in Seneca International Academy, Markham, Toronto, and another one that's at Harvard University, that's Religion, Peace, and Conflict through EDX. About this course, I have discussed this course with the brother Faisal Aslam. He also has taken similar course. Like Harvard University 2 years back, it opened some of the courses that anyone can have access. These are the specialty about these courses that they are asynchronous. Whenever you have time, you can complete them. Inshallah, in the next year or in few months, I'm going to complete this course, the Religion, Peace, and Conflict, through EDX from the Harvard University. And currently, I'm enrolled in the Seneca International Academy, Markham, Toronto, and there I'm studying computer programming, which is focused on artificial intelligence. And this is the cover photo of the book, Narrative of Islamic Expeditions, which was published last year. I think it was published in 2022 by a well-known publishing house of India, that's Waller Publishing House. So it's the cover photo of that. And one important thing about this is that in an independent study, it's like I'm not promoting any, I'm not giving any opinion in this book. I'm just saying, I'm just putting forward every ideology, how it emerged, and what are its main theses in this book. And one of the important things about this is that I'm not promoting any ideology or criticizing any ideology, but it's purely academic work, where everyone has a right that he can learn these things, and then it's up to him that what he will decide, which ideology he finds better and which he finds not. Now I'm going to the summary of this book. Narrative of Islamic Expeditions, as the name suggests, that what it is talking about. We know that after the First World War, when Ottomans were defeated, and the unity of the Muslim world that was shattered completely, because before the 1923, the unity of the Muslims that was not shattered. That was at that time, like majority of the Muslim nations, those were one, and there was the belief among the Muslims that we have their own system, we have own empire, we have our own political system. But once that Ottoman Empire was shattered, that was defeated in the First World War, there was a rage and there was and confusion among the Muslim youth that what happened. We had our own system, but now we do not have anything. And they started rethinking about that. And it was because of this reason, all across the globe, there emerged many Muslim organizations which focused on the re-establishment of the Islamic Caliphate, and for whom we use the term in Urdu, Iqamati, those who did the Jiddu-Jahad for Iqamati. That was the terminology mostly used. And one of the prominent examples is the Allama Iqbal. If you will look at the entire work of the Allama Iqbal, he focused on the glorious history of the Muslims. Then he focused on the youth and he told them that you have your own civilization, you had your own culture. That's not based on the modern nationhood, but that's based on the La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. You have to focus on that. So these kind of the Renaissance organizations of Islam, those emerged all across the globe. Like in Pakistan, there was the Jamaat Islami by Sayyid Abu Ala Madudi, and Ikhwan al-Muslimun, Ibadur Rahman, Sayyid Nursi. So there were many organizations. Now, what was the basis of their narrative, and what was the basis of this? You can say, like where from they derived this narrative, and what's that narrative? First, I will discuss that what's that narrative, and after that, I'm going to discuss the counter narrative. We know that for any Islamic law, usually the primary source for deriving any Islamic law, those are the verses of the Quran. We know that if we have any Quranic verse, you can derive any law from that, or you can abandon any law from that. After the Quranic verses, there are the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is a collection of hadith, and after that, one of the important things for deriving any Islamic law in Islamic jurisprudence, that's the life history of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his rightly guided caliph. All right. So the narrative which is prevailing, the primary source for that is the life history of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and life history of the rightly guided caliphate. We know that Muslims at that time had to fight many wars. The initial wars, those all were defensive, like the Battle of Badr, Battle of Uhud, Battle of Trench. The surrounding tribes, they were attacking the Muslim city of the Medina, and the Muslims were defending them. And those all were defensive wars. But at the last time, there was one war, the Battle of Tabuk. That was an expedition against the Byzantine Empire. Once Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam left this world, the rightly guided caliphate, the Khulafa al-Rashidun, they carried on those expeditions against the Byzantine Empire and Sassanid Empire. Those were the greatest empires of that time who were surrounding their boundaries with the Muslim Empire. Once the Khulafa al-Rashidin did the expeditions against the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire, they used to put in front of them the three conditions which they derived from the Surah At-Tawbah. The first one is that if you accept Islam, they were challenging them that if you accept Islam, you will be the equal citizens and you will be the part of Islamic you will be a part of Islamic system. And if you do not accept Islam, you have second option that you can pay jizya. And if you are not paying jizya, then final option that's you have to be ready for war. For that, they used to cite the verse like there are verses in the Surah Tawbah that قاتلوا الذين لا يؤمنون بالله ولا باليوم الآخر ولا يدينون دين الحق, that fight those who do not believe in the messenger and Allah. And the condition is حتى يؤتوا الجزية عن يد وهم صاغرون, until they pay the jizya, and they would be the second class citizens in your Muslim empire. And one more thing is that if they accept Islam and if they offer prayer and if they pay zakah, then they will be the brothers, they will be the equal citizens. So these were the three things which was the primary reason for the expeditions of that time. Now in 20th century, many people in the Muslim world, they derived the narrative based on these things. They cite that whatever the Khulafa Rashidun did at the time, whatever the companions of the Prophet Muhammad did at the time, if we will be given a chance, we will have to do the same thing. The first thing is we have to strive for the establishment of an Islamic system. Once that Islamic system will be formed, once that Islamic system will be established, after that, the foreign policy of that Islamic nation with the rest of the non-Muslim nations would be that we will tell them that if you will accept Islam, you will be the part of our civilization, you will be the part of our empire. And if you are not accepting Islam, you have second option, you can pay the jizya, but you will not be the equal citizens, you will be the second class citizens. There will be a difference between the rights of you and the rights for the Muslim. And the third and the only option for you, that you have to be ready for war, because the non-Muslim, they do not have the legitimacy to rule the world, which is the world of the Almighty Allah, whose motive is to establish His rule on this planet. And they used to cite many verses, like the primary verse that "Udkhulu fi silmi kaffa," that you have to enter in Islam completely. You cannot. And one of the primary things they used to say, according to their ideology, that Islam has some rules which can be fulfilled by individually, and there are some rules which cannot be fulfilled, which are not based on the individual, they are based on the society, they are based on the system. If you have a society, then you can fulfill some Islamic rules. And then they cite that أفتؤمنون ببعض الكتاب وتكفرون ببعض فما جزاء من يكفر ذلك منكم إلا خزي في الحياة الدنيا ويوم القيامة يردون إلى أشد العذاب. That's the verse of Surah An-Nisa, that if you follow some of the verses of the Quran, if you follow some of the orders of the Islam, and you refuse to follow some of the orders of the Islam, then for you there will be a worst punishment. Like decide that if we follow only those rules which are based on our individuality, but we won't follow those rules and regulations which are based on the society, then we are the sinful. Once this system was developed, and they cited the primary reason that and the expeditions of the Sahaba against the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire, and they derived this narrative. So this is the narrative which is for which you can call the classical narrative. And after that, like this is the narrative of Islamic expeditions which is cited. For understanding this briefly, I have divided my book into the three parts. First part is the concise history of the Muslims. Second is the initial verses of Surah At-Tawbah, and the last one is the derivation of the narrative. The reason that why I have divided this book into the three parts, because the primary source for deriving this narrative, that's the history of the Muslims, especially the initial history of the Sahaba when they were doing expeditions against the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire. I have not elaborated the entire Muslim history. Only those parts of the Muslim history have been emphasized which deal with the expeditions against those empires at the time during the reign of Khulafa Rashidun. And after that, there are some verses, some initial verses of the Surah At-Tawbah which are taken as supporting of that narrative. And I have also introduced those verses and a small interpretation of them in my book. And the final is the derivation of the narrative, that how this narrative is derived and what's that narrative. So basis of that narrative, I have cited that those are the initial expeditions of the Sahaba, initial expeditions of the Khulafa al-Rashidin during the reign of the Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Umar al-Faruq radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And there is one more thing. At the last, I have introduced there the counter narrative of Farahi school of thought, which is completely different from the traditional narrative. The narrative which I initially mentioned, that there is a prevailing narrative that Khulafa al-Rashidun of that time, and they had some kind of the international policy of that government at that time, and by which they derived that narrative that if we will have an Islamic system, that what will be our foreign policy with the rest of the non-Muslim nations. But the counter narrative of the Farahi school of thought, that's completely different. It diverts 180 degree from the traditional narrative. The counter narrative of Farahi school of thought, which is finally presented by the Mr. Shahid Amin Malik, that's based on speciality of divine law and finality of testimony. What's speciality of divine law and finality of testimony? Speciality of divine law, that we call as Sunnati Ilahi. That's based on Sunnati Ilahi and Itmami Hujjat. Finality of testimony means Itmami Hujjat. Now, what's that? According to the counter narrative of Farahi school of thought, they say that there is a divine law, there is a Sunnat Ilahi, which is a term in Islam, Sunnat Ilahi, for which Allah says, وَلَن تَجْدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا وَلَن تَجْدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَحْوِيلًا. There are some rules which Allah has created for Himself like that. So those rules, you won't find any change in them, in those rules. So one of the Sunnat Ilahi, one of that rule is that when any prophet comes to any nation, there happens finality of testimony, there happens Itmam Hujjat. Like if any prophet is appointed to any nation, when he's physically present there, or any person sees him physically, or any nation witnesses any prophet physically, there happens finality of testimony, there happens Itmam Hujjat. What does this mean, there happens finality of testimony? When prophet comes to any nation physically, for that nation, there does not remain any excuse to not to accept the prophet and the divine message of that. That means that if any prophet comes to you physically, for you there happens finality of testimony. Then you don't have any reason, then you don't have any excuse. You cannot cite any excuse that I did not understand the message, and that's why I did not accept. So you don't have any excuse not to accept the divine message of that prophet. Now, once this finality of testimony happens, then there is a rule, then there is a Sunnat Ilahi. That Sunnat Ilahi is the people who accept the message of any prophet when he comes to them. Those people are rewarded in this world like they would be rewarded in life after death. Like if any prophet comes to any nation and people accept him, those people would be blessed with many bounties in life after death. But small amount of that is provided to them in this world. Similarly, if any prophet comes to any nation and people, they understand the truth, but still they do not accept it, they reject that prophet, what happens according to Sunnati Ilahi to them? The punishment which would be given to them in life after death, the small amount of that punishment is given to them in this world. It was according to this Sunnat Ilahi, it was according to this divine law that Quran refers to many nations that who did not accept their prophet, they were punished badly. This was the reason, this was the primary reason that the nation of the Pharaoh, the nation of the Musa alayhi salam, that was doomed, and some nations they were punished by some natural disasters, and some were punished by many means. You will find the examples of the nations of the Ad, Samud. Those all were punished in this world because of this reason, because of that Sunnat Ilahi, because they had witnessed the prophet in their life, but they did not accept. So that's why, according to Sunnat Ilahi, the small punishment was given to them. Now, as far as the nation of the Prophet Muhammad is concerned, the people who did not accept him, the punishment for them was not any natural disaster. The punishment for them is mentioned in the Surah At-Tawbah. يُعَذِّبُهُمْ بِأَيْدِيكُمْ. Like Allah says, the punishment for the people who did not accept the Prophet Muhammad would be by the hands of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like the nations and the people of that time who did not accept Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. According to Surah Tawbah, for them the punishment would be by the hands of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So according to that counter narrative, the wars and the expeditions against the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire by the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that was not any general law. That was according to the Sunnah Ilahi, because there had happened the Itmam Hujjat, there had happened the finality of the testimony. So that was punishment to that nation according to the Sunnah Ilahi. We cannot generalize those wars and expeditions. So that's why the counter narrative of Farahi school of thought, and they do not accept the traditional narrative, because they generalize the traditional narrative, generalize those expeditions, but the counter narrative says that it was special to those people of that time and space, so you cannot generalize it for now. So this is the comparison between the traditional narrative and the counter narrative. The book is all about this. That's how that narrative is derived, and how this narrative is derived. What are many beliefs in that? These are all mentioned in this book. So this was the short summary of the book, and I hope that you find it interesting. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And I'm extremely thankful that you provided your precious time, and you provided your time to listen to this student. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And I'm giving back screen to the brother Fasilas.
Thank you very much, Shahid. It was really interesting and very, interesting work. I will request the audience, if they have any questions, please raise your hands or just unmute your mics and ask a question. Yeah, Sean Sher, you have a question?
Assalamu alaikum, Shahid bhai. Great presentation. I wanted to ask you a question. I think that's a little bit more general about your own sort of research interests. And that is, after you have done this and you've completed this project at a very young age, mashallah. So inshallah, we'll be praying for you and your success with whatever your plans are in the future. But what direction do you see yourself going with respect to not only scholarship, but other research projects? What interests do you have? And what do you think the older generation can do with respect to not only just general community members like myself, but also the scholarly community, to make it easier for people such as yourself to develop in their journey? Do you have any ideas about that?
I simply believe that if you want to go to the research, especially in the Islamic research in the contemporary world, like if you look back at our history, to any great Islamic scholar, he had a great firmness on the subjects of that time and space. Like if we will look at the Imam Ghazali or Imam Abi Taymiyyah, they were the great scholars of the major disciplines and the major subjects of that time and space. So I believe that in contemporary world, if anyone wants to go to the research in Islam, first he has to learn some basics of this world. Like there is a science, there is a computer science, and there is the physics, and there are many schools that he has to learn. He has to like there is a major concept. If anyone in Islam, we were discussing about that, he has to have some kind of the firmness on the biology. Like there is an evolution. And in contemporary world, the atheism is promoting like the wildfire. So for that, the basis is that they have some scientific laws and some scientific theories. So if anyone is going to the Islamic research, I think he has to first prepare. He has to first prepare and learn the basic subjects of this world. He has to understand this.
So if I understood you correctly, I think you're talking about in each era, there's like some dominant subjects. And in this era, you've listed some that it's some secular topics that it's absolutely necessary to have a command of if you're going to have a mature understanding of how to address religious topics in this time period.
Definitely.
Okay, that's interesting. And I think that with that view that it is important to have a collaboration between individual specialists, religious specialists, and secular specialists. And I think in the next generation, we have lots of people who are, getting education in a variety of topics. And I think the main thing is important to keep them connected and keep them aware of each other's work so that they have the possibility to learn from each other. Because the breadth of topics that you've talked about I don't think it's very easy for one particular individual to necessarily have a command over all of those topics. But I think that if in a community of scholars, we can have that. And I think that Al-Mawridi is also working towards similar things. So thank you for your presentation and your comments.
Thank you so much for feedback also. And that's what I was saying, like there is terminology in every subject. At least is someone, if he will not master all subjects, it's not possible that you could master every subject, but you have to learn at least the terminology of that subject. So if you will start researching individually on that subject, you could get that. Like there is a terminology in the physics, there is a terminology in the biology. Like if you are a traditional Islamic scholar, you have just studied in, you do not know the basics. Like if you are not able to get, like there is some basics in the quantum mechanics, there is some basics in the evolutionary biology, the mutations. And if you start researching that what's evolution and how Islam looks at it, and you do not know the mechanism of the gene combination, you do not know the mechanism of that, how genes are combined and what's the mutation, how sometimes there happens a disorder in the gene pool, or if you're not able to understand some basics of this. So when I am saying that you have to know these things, I'm not saying that you have to master every subject. You just have to learn the terminology. Like if you will when you will have collaboration with many individuals who will be the special, who will have the masters or who will have speciality in that subject, when they will talk to you, you have to understand that, and you can understand that only if you have the basic little bit acquaintance with the terminology of that subject. Like if you do not have anything with that subject, if any individual is talking to you about any science, I think probably you would not be able to understand and get the things what he is saying and what he is talking about.
Jazakallah, Shahid. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? Okay, thanks a lot, Shahid Amin. This was really brilliant work, and we all wish you best of luck for your future projects and academic service. We are hopefully seeing you very soon once you're back in Mississauga.
Yeah, inshallah, I'm also eagerly waiting to see you in person.
Yeah, inshallah.
Next month I'm coming back to Toronto. It's
Inshallah.
Then inshallah I will see you.
Inshallah. And our prayers are with you. Thanks again for your time and for your presentation. It was wonderful.
अगर आप चाहते हैं कि हमारी वीडियो बर वक्त आप तक पहुंच जाए, तो हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करके बेल आइकॉन के बटन को दबा दें और हमें लाइक और शेयर भी कर लें। थैंक यू।